Hey, Christy Mattoon here from Mind Rewire. Thank you for being here. I'm sitting outside. It's a glorious, amazing, beautiful day. I'm hoping some hummingbirds come by and buzz us while we're sitting here. I've got hummingbird feeders all over the place, so that's kind of fun. I wanted to share with you today though, something that happened to me this week, and most specifically yesterday. That it was just it was one of those things that you just stop and go, wow, right? The things that you don't know, the things that you don't know, or the things that maybe you thought you knew and you just didn't quite act on enough, or the things that you realized you had an aha moment or whatever, and you just let it kind of slide by. This is kind of one of those. Let me tell you the story. What happened was, for years, my mother's been sick, and she's what I would call a narcissist. She is was an amazingly mean person in my childhood, to girls specifically, and it's no news. I've talked about it before. The girls in the family all seem to have the same consensus. All the females in the family have the same consensus. And she died on the supermoon. She passed away finally, bless her heart, after being in a nursing home pretty much through all of COVID. Pretty horrific in my estimation, but that's how the things played out. As far as I know, they did give her the shot. She did have a huge stroke towards the end, and that's neither here nor there. It's just the way it played out. What happened was afterwards. So I have been out to see her while she was in this nursing home multiple times, and you kind of prep yourself when you know something like this is coming, right? We all kind of prep ourselves. And I've been prepping myself for years. I thought this woman was going to die when I was in high school, because that's what she always said. She was so sick, she was going to die. I just assumed, right? When I was in college, every phone call I got, I thought that was going to be the phone call. Well, 30 some odd years later, you're just like, okay, well. And people will ask me, are you sure you're okay? There's got to be some stuffed emotions and all these. I'm like, I really don't think I did. I work on this stuff all the time. And I don't think there's any stuffed emotions. There's just the weirdness left of why she was the way she was, and why she did what she did. And so I had this amazing opportunity, and this is what I wanted to tell you about. A really beautiful person that's in my life has this capability it far exceeds anything I've ever seen before. And she basically can speak to anybody's energy. She can go in and kind of sit and talk and just feel and notice. And so I called her yesterday morning, and because my mother's funeral's coming up and all the stuff that surrounds that kind of thing, and I'm like, I just don't feel the need to go, for a lot of reasons, and I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And I want to ask her, like, why? What the heck was going through your head when you were doing what you were doing, when you were treating us the way you were treating us? And when you get the opportunity to ask somebody these questions from the other side and get a whole different insight, it's quite interesting. It's quite clarifying. It's quite beautiful. And that's how this turned out. It's quite beautiful. And so Zarina did her magic. I can't even tell you. And she said, okay, I think I've got your mom here. She's sitting here, and she said, I want to tell you, she's presenting herself as a 20-something. So, maybe 22, 23. She goes, probably 22-ish. She goes, definitely 22. And why that mattered, I'm not sure. But presenting herself as a very put together, very beautiful, calm was kind of the operative person, and just sat there smiling. And I was like, really? And I was like, maybe at that age, I don't know when she started having babies, but something changed. Something happened, right? So she's presenting herself as this 22-year-old person, young, beautiful, calm, collected, put together was the words that Zarina used. And and I'm just like, I don't know that person. I don't know that person at all. I don't know that person. And Zarina goes, I'm just telling you what I'm feeling, and this is what she's presenting. So see if you can tap into that person. See if you can tap into, and then we'll ask your questions. So I did. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, it was definitely her, the essence of this person that I grew up under, but it wasn't the side of her I knew. Does that make any sense? And so I kept asking questions like, what was going on? What happened that caused you to be like this? Like in psychological circles, you would take this into the realm of the childhood and what happened to you in your childhood. And she definitely had some very serious trauma in her childhood. And she worked on it and she did different things. And, you know, we always thought clearly that wasn't enough. And finally, it came down to me trying to ask this question. And the way it came out of my mouth was, the person who was my birther, the person who bore me into this world, is not the same person that grew me up. And Zarina goes, no, they were definitely the same person. She goes, the physical body, and she started talking about cells and genes and all these. I was like, no, you misunderstand. Let me reword it. Maybe I just misspoke. The person, the spirit that brought me into this world through that physical body was not the same spirit that brought me up through that physical body. And Zarina was like, oh. She goes, wait a minute. And she started getting the chills, and she's like, okay, well, there's definitely a negative energy coming through, like you've put your finger on something. I'm like, let me tell you a story. So now I'm telling you a story inside a story. Years ago, I walked into my parents' house, and my dad was in his chair and she was sitting in hers. And we used to say it was like a light switch. You never knew what you were going to get. Something would make that switch flip, and she would be a different person. She'd be sitting there talking to you, being decent, being, you know, nice. And then all of a sudden, holy cow. And it's just like, like, why? What did I say that triggered you this time? What happened that, right? You never knew. You never knew. And so one day this happened, and she would get this voice, and I always called it her demon voice. Like, oh, here's her demon. Here we go. And so one day she did that, and I went straight into, because I'd been looking up depossessions and understanding some of this kind of stuff, demonic kind of things, and just trying to understand it a little bit more. And I just automatically went into this depossession kind of prayer. I was like, you are not allowed here. And I was speaking to that side of her, as far as, like, if you would say, okay, well, that's a negative energy, that's a demon, let's call it what it was. And she kind of looked at me when I was done, and I was like, you're not going to affect me or my family anymore. You're not affecting my kids. You're not affecting future generations. Like, I'm done with this. I am done with it. And my dad's just sitting there with his eyes like wide open, his jaws on the floor. And it was just interesting. And it didn't stop it. The thing would show up. It would show up. It would show up. And I was just like, I'm out. Like, I can't do this. And so it showed up yesterday. And I was like, oh, that was real. So it's the thing that, like, you put your finger on and you're like, from a psychological standpoint, from a clinical psychology standpoint, you know, she had some kind of psychosis or some kind of, there's a word for it that I'm not thinking of. It starts with a B, not bipolar, but probably that too. But if you have a negative energy attachment, a demon, you have, and not from an earthly sense of demon, like I've got demons falling from my childhood, my parents beat me, this happened, that happened, blah, blah, blah. No. A demon meaning, and negative energy meaning spiritual, meaning not of this worldly, right? Some kind of attachment that's gotten into you, gotten hold of you, put its hooks in you, right? And causes chaos and mayhem, basically, right, in your life. And so that showed up, and Zarina was just like, oh. I was like, how do you? And through it all, my mom remained calm. So she kept tapping back into my mother's essence that was there with her. And she's like, she's just sitting here smiling and nodding. And I was like, wow, so this other thing, like, that was just kind of there, and this wasn't her, this is her. And I'm like, well, that sucks, you know, 30 some odd years or 50 some odd years at this point of me just like nodding my head and going, like, and trying, try and fix yourself through all this. Here's how fast fixing can happen. As Irina kept sitting there and talking about that spirit that was sitting in front of her, just sitting there smiling, the calmness, right? The calmness started coming through. And now even into today, I'm doing different things. And I was outside just now clipping flowers, Gerber daisies. I love Gerber daisies. And I'm clipping these Gerber daisies, and the flowers themselves, the new ones, were folding under, so they were folding down for some reason, but they were blooming, they were opening, and I was like trying to turn them back up, and I broke 3 or 4 of them off. And every time I broke one off, I was just like, and all of a sudden in the back of my head, I felt my mom's presence, the calm one, go, just put them in a bowl on your table, they're beautiful. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And I'm just like talking to her like she was standing there. And I'm like trying to reach under and turn all these flowers up. And I'm like, it's the hidden things, right? The hidden beauty that you don't see because it had grown underneath and it had its face turned under. You don't know it's there until you start rooting around and looking and going, oh, there you are. And I think it was just really a good representation of actually finding the real spirit, the real trueness of who that woman was, and not what she was doing or representing for any reason, for her own, whatever you want to call it, psychological issues or whatever, trauma, childhood trauma, demonic issues, possessions, negative energy, call it what you want to call it. The trueness of who she was finally showed through at her passing, and the peace and grace that she exudes now is the person, and I could sit and say, I wish I had known her my whole life. But I didn't, but I get to participate with her now. So now it's coming out and shining through. And I think the reason I want to tell you this story, the reason I want to say this out loud is because it magnifies the golden period that we're in. It magnifies the age of grace, the age of wisdom, the consciousness rising that we're in right now for those who are willing to hear and those who are willing to look. Those who are willing to put their hands into the darkness and not be afraid to come, to get messy a little bit, I guess. When you're not in that position and you're just like, okay, let's look around and see what was there. I found a whole different side of this person that I honestly never knew existed. I don't know at what point that change happened. I do know it was probably before I was born. It was after my oldest brother, possibly after my second brother, second oldest. But she had something had definitely already attached to her, and it was there for the rest of her life. And I would have to say, if you've got that kind of thing going on, don't think you're stuck with it. If there's just a struggle, right? If there is just a constant struggle, find something you believe in, right? We've all put aside religion and tossed aside teachings that we think are, taught wrong or whatever. And I'm sure a lot of them are. I know a lot of them are. But there are some truths inside those teachings. There's a lot of truths inside those wisdoms. Grab hold of something you can grab hold of and just stare it in the face and then go dig through the yuck. You will be surprised what you might find. All right, so I just want to bless you. Thank you for being here. It is Sunday morning. It is a glorious, glorious morning. Here's my little flowers. It's just beautiful out here. I don't know if you can see anything. I'm turning it into the sun. We have a ton of birds that come and eat down here, and then we've got the hummingbirds that come when it's not too hot. Anyway, have a blessed, blessed day. If this helps, leave a comment below. If it made any sense, please leave a comment. That's the first time I've told that story, except to my husband last night. I tried to tell it to him, and he just stood there staring at me. So, anyway, bless you. Peace. Talk to you soon.